Investigations are underway after 7 bodies with gunshot wounds were found under a bridge in KwaMashu, that's in the north of Durban. The motive for the murders is suspected to be linked to growing vigilante activity in that community. This is one of many cases reported in various provinces in recent weeks. Limpopo, for example, police there saying a record number of murders have occurred in suspected vigilantism. So, criminologist from the University of Stellenbosch is Dr. Guy Lamb, who joins us now to unpack this situation. Dr. Lamb, thank you very much for your time. Based on the observations and exactly what we have just recapped, some of the areas that seem to be seized with this matter, what's your analysis of it? Is it police losing trust of the community? What exactly? How should we interpret this?
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. I think it's important to note that vigilantism has always been in South Africa. I mean, predates, 1994. It's the way in which communities feel unsafe, frustrated, dealing with crime and safety issues, often respond when they feel the police aren't going to solve the problems for them, or the police are not responding in the ways that they want to respond. So that's really kind of a background to this, and often it's linked to a sense of wanting to use violence and wanting to use force and coercion to try and discourage this kind of behavior, but also to punish. And the sort of thinking behind it is that if you punish, then the incidences will go down. What we're seeing recently, and if we look at the recent crime reports that have been published by the South African Police Services, we see that vigilantism is a key driver of murder and attempted murder. Across South Africa, it's not the main one, it's about number 3, but certainly it's a lot more visible, it's a lot more prominent within KZN. So if we're looking at what's been happening in KwaMashu, and if we sort of look at the history of this, it has quite a distinct history of vigilante attacks. I mean, some of them have been linked to hostels and control between gangs and fights and conflict over control of hostels and sort of extortion networks and rent-seeking behavior that happens there. So we've seen that in recent years. But what we've been seeing in the case recently, it seems to be linked to an issue of, petty criminality, of, alleged drug addicts who are perpetrating crimes, street robberies, and the sense of, groups in that area, getting fed up and then taking the law into their own hands. Yeah. So I think it's quite important just to note that, sometimes you have vigilantism that is sort of driven by instantaneous factors. There is a robbery by an individual, and residents on the street then get angry and respond and assault and sometimes murder the alleged perpetrator. But then what happens, you get coordinated incidences, and I think this is one of these examples of coordinated incidences when a group within a community, within KwaMashu, has got to the point where they are frustrated with the level of criminality, feel that the police are not dealing with the problem sufficiently in terms of what they would like to see, and then they organize themselves and they take action.
Yeah. Dr. Lamb, I want to actually include the entire criminal justice system here, and I'll tell you why I am posing this question to you in this way. Yesterday, on the radio, relating specifically to the incident that occurred in KwaMashu, a friend of the deceased comes out on the radio and says, "We know that my friends were involved in acts of criminality, but they did not have to die in this way." And just using logic to try and summarize what he was saying from my analysis of it is that these were clearly well-known people to the community who were allegedly involved in acts of criminality. And so the community gradually getting frustrated, probably they would get arrested and come out. And this is precisely the complaint of the police minister, Begicele, who says, we make arrests, people go to court, and the next day they come out. And that is what pits the police against the community. Do I have that right?
Well, it's certainly one of the contributing factors, and it's the sense of around that justice takes a long time. Often it's the sense of around where individuals are arrested. There's some evidence, those individuals go to court, and then, magistrates or courts will decide that, that there's going to be a trial happening at some point. and then those individuals may be given bail, and they're out on bail, especially if it's not a kind of a serious crime such as murder or attempted murder. But of course, these individuals, if they have kind of their career criminals, and certainly their main approach to making money is to rob people, then they are going to be back on the street, especially when you've got the police that are under-resourced here. I think an important point to be made about this recent incidences, and as we've seen it happen in other areas as well with high levels of crime, is when the businesses and taxi associations are feeling the negative effects of criminality, where their passengers and their clients are being robbed, and as a result affecting their businesses, and they want this to stop. And often, if you, for example, looking at the minibus taxi sector, the response is often violence when their bottom line is being affected. So we've seen this happen in Pretoria, we've seen this happen in a few other areas over the past few years. So it's the sense of around one wants to bring this problem and this threat to an end, but one also wants to punish and demonstrate and try and discourage others from doing it. Yeah. And the violence is the strategy here.
So what needs to change about the criminal justice system for people to not take the law into their own hands?
Well, I think the first and foremost is really about police visibility and how the police engage with members of the public, and how individuals who are perpetrating these kind of crimes are in a way that the evidence is collected so that they do prison time and that they're taken off the streets. The problem is that often prisons are kind of overwhelmed and overcrowded, so that's often not a strategy. I think the point here is to look at ways and means of trying to address the problem. Why is there such high levels of criminality? Why is there such high levels of kind of drug abuse and drug abuse linked to crime happening, and trying to find ways to deal with that, rather than just a situation of throwing more police at the problem, where it's, that just really dampens the problem temporarily if it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah. A political party, Dr. Lamb, came out at one point to suggest that specifically in KZN, poverty, inequality, and simply hunger is breeding hitmen. It's breeding the people that are commonly referred to as Izinkabi. This was the National Freedom Party. This is a party in Parliament. And they were asking the provincial government in KZN to declare a curfew. Is the social, or are the socio-economic conditions in the country, or should we say in specific communities in the country, do you think that it is a fair assessment that the difficulties in communities are breeding criminals?
I mean, it is a complex issue, and there's a lot of research that goes on about this, but we do know a lot about why certain individuals perpetrate crime and why certain individuals are more prone to being victims of crime. And if we're looking, for example, as an individual who becomes someone who perpetrates violence and either tries to kill someone or does kill someone, there are a combination of factors, and of course poverty and inequality do underlie this, but there are a lot of other sort of intervening factors that play a role in this, such as if you were brought up in a dysfunctional household and you experience a lot of violence, if you then start to associate with other individuals who are school dropouts and perpetrate petty crime, and you get involved with this particular group, then it escalates the activities. If you're experiencing and witnessing violence on a regular basis, if you're in a neighborhood with low levels of policing, that tends to contribute to all of this. And it's particularly younger men who are more prone to this kind of violence. So that's really sort of what we know about general kind of violence perpetration. But when it comes to the sort of hitman economy, the same dynamics play out, but you have a circumstance where these individuals get recruited into these established networks or groupings of hitmen. And it's the same you'd find, for example, with violent extremist groups, with terrorist groups, the same modus operandi is applied. There are certain individuals who are more prone to perpetrating violence, who may have perpetrated violence in the past, and hence their particular skills and experience are wanted by hitmen. So it's not just about poverty and inequality. It does contribute to it. But if, for example, if we look at a lot of other African countries have very low levels of crime, but same levels of high levels of poverty. A lot has to do with what's going on in our homes and what's going on in our communities.
Dr. Guy Lamb is a criminologist. Thank you very much for your analysis of this situation.